Hi, everyone. I'm Fanny, Marketing Manager here at Kids & Company. Thank you all so much for joining us today for today's webinar. We would like to welcome Mo Reitstein, a registered physiotherapist with Toronto Kids Physio. Kids Physio provides pediatric physiotherapy services across Canada. As babies, kids, and teenagers functions differently from adults, their spaces and team are equipped to provide the highest quality physiotherapy care delivered in a fun and engaging way. Today, Mo will discuss the many various options of outdoor equipment for your child to enjoy. You may be wondering when it is appropriate to start riding tricycles or scooters, or if one equipment is better than the other. Mo is here today to help you understand which equipment may suit your child better. Although Kids Physio services are in Canada in person, we know that the tips shared today will also be helpful for our families across the US as well. Please note that some equipment discussed in today's webinar may not be available at all Kids & Company centers. The webinar is offered to our audiences interested in learning about the different equipment available out there. We're so thrilled to have Mo join us today. If you have any questions throughout the session, please use the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen, and we will ensure that all questions will be addressed at the end of today's session. So Mo, it's over to you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Fanny. I'm just going to go ahead and share my screen. Perfect. Okay. Fanny, can you confirm that everyone sees this correctly?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, so thank you so much for having me. As Fanny introduced me, my name is Mo, and I'm here to talk to you guys about outdoor gross motor play. So bikes, scooters, and ride-ons now that it's summertime. So a little introduction of myself. I'm a pediatric physiotherapist here at Toronto Kids Physio. I personally work at our Midtown location at Yonge and Lawrence. And I practice through playing with babies and kids age 0 to 18 to help them reach their goals. And I love speaking in the community, both to support parents and to learn from them about their experiences so I can best support the children who come to our clinic. Here we go. So an overview of what I'm going to talk about today. We'll talk about some of the general benefits of various ride-on equipment. Then we'll go into earlier ride-on toys for younger kids, the various different types of bikes, the various scooters, and I'll show you the take-home sheet that you will all receive following the webinar. I also just want to acknowledge that the information in this presentation is geared towards typically developing children. So children with any types of developmental disabilities or motor delays may also be able to use this equipment with or without adaptations, but the recommended age and prerequisite skills might differ. Okay, so in general, why are outdoor ride-ons beneficial for children's physical development? So it helps them to build muscular strength and endurance, mostly through their legs and through their core. It helps with coordination and motor planning. So these are words that will come up a lot, so I'll break them down for you a bit. Coordination is the ability to use different parts of our body together, both smoothly and efficiently. So for example, if you picture doing a jumping jack, the ability to move both our arms and our legs at the same time in sequence. Motor planning is the ability to organize the body's actions. So knowing what steps to take and in what order to complete a certain task. The next thing that ride-ons can help to develop is our balance and core stability. It allows a child to go through the process of motor learning, so to teach their body how to perform a new motor skill. It helps with body and spatial awareness, self-esteem and confidence, and develops a sense of fun in the outdoors from an early age. There's a lot of research that supports that physically active kids tend to grow into physically active adults, and kids need about 60 minutes of physical activity per day. So this is a really great way to get those minutes in. Okay, so I'm going to start with early ride-on toys. And I believe that there are some of these at some of the Kids & Co centers. So here's an example. You can see the little kid on the right sitting on what I would call an early ride-on toy. So these are characterized by, they have either 3 or 4 wheels, but they have a very stable base, and then some kind of seat and some kind of handlebars. So how do you know that your child would be ready to use one of these? Typically, they'll be ready by about 18 months or older. This also depends on how their other gross motor skills have progressed so far. So some kids by 18 months may be walking for a long time, or some may be new walkers at that point. That's kind of your age guideline. Then looking into physically, if they're ready enough, they will need to be able to sit independently without any kind of backrest. They need to be able to hold on to the handlebars, and their feet need to be able to be flat on the ground. There are often height and weight requirements or restrictions on these types of toys that are usually very clearly marked on the box and totally depend the product. Benefits of this kind of ride-on toy is early introduction to learning how to mount and dismount the toy. So there's a lot that goes on when trying to figure out that motor plan. So the child will need to hold on with their 2 hands, then they'll need to stand on one leg while swinging the other one over. So A, that requires some balance, and B, it requires some motor planning to figure it out. They'll start to learn the reciprocal patterning and how to propel themselves forward. So they'll be moving their legs one at a time to move themselves forward. And they'll also start to develop their grip strength through their arms, which is really nice prep for future skills that involve their hands, fine motor activities, monkey bars, climbing, things like that. There's a big variation in the types of ride-on toys out there. I've shown a few examples here. Things you'll notice that will differ. Firstly, the number of wheels. So we have our 3-wheel one over here versus a 4-wheel one over here. The width of the seat. So this blue one has a very wide seat. It's pretty stable, versus this purple one has a more narrow bike type seat, which is going to require a little bit more core stability because it's so narrow. Steering. So again, this blue one here would only go forwards, backwards. You'd need to pick it up and move it to turn a corner. The wheels don't turn, versus this purple one down here has swivel wheels, so it can move in a lot of directions. So for this, keeping in mind, while it's really handy that the purple one can turn, it means it's going to be harder to control, because the more movement it has, the more the child has to control the movement using their core and using their arms and legs. So that one will be a little bit trickier to ride on. Lastly, the material. So this one up in the corner here, the 3-wheeled one, is made out of wood. These have been really popular lately because they're better for the environment and reduce plastic. However, they are typically not as durable to weather as some of the plastic or aluminum metal ones. So just something to keep in mind when you're deciding, is it going to be for indoors, for outdoors? Are you wanting to take it on grass versus pavement? You would know best what you have available to you and where your child will be playing, but that would definitely impact what material and type you would buy. Okay, so next we're going to move up to bikes. There are a lot of variations of bikes, so I'm going to go through them. I believe at Kids & Co centers there are tricycles, but not some of the bigger ones. However, I'll still touch on them a little bit just so you can know what to expect and how one preps you for the other. Okay, so first up we have tricycles. So a tricycle has 3 wheels and pedals, and it is typically fairly low to the ground compared to, for example, a bike with training wheels. Children will be ready to ride a tricycle between 2.5 to 3 years old. They'll need to have sufficient leg strength to be able to push on the pedals. So how you'll know they're ready, they should be walking, they should be climbing on the playground, on maybe little ladder structures or little rock walls, or going up and down the stairs. They should be able to step up onto something and starting to jump. Those are all really good signs that they have enough leg strength to be successful on the tricycle. Again, height, very important. Their feet should be able to be flat on both pedals all the way through the cycle. So if they have to go on their tiptoe by the time they're at the bottom, that is, their legs would be too short. That's going to be really hard to push. And then they should also be able to take their feet off and put them flat on the ground for safety of mount and dismount. For this reason, it's really great to bring your kid with you when buying one, or be prepared to try it out at home and then return it to make sure that it does fit properly. Benefits of riding a tricycle, same as the Ride-On toy, learning to mount and dismount. This has the added benefit of getting leg strength from all the pushing through pedaling and coordination to be able to push through one while the other one comes around and then push through the other in that reciprocal pattern. There's a lot of variation of tricycles out there. So I have some examples of photos here. What's really nice is a lot of these kind of take you through the phases of learning to ride a tricycle. So some of them have a parent push handle, like down here, where the child could get used to sitting on it, used to holding the handlebars, even used to kind of passively having their feet go around the pedals, but they get that help through the push handle. Some actually are set up like a full stroller and may even have a reclined seat, so they can just ride it like a normal stroller, but then they can put their feet on the pedals and kind of try to pedal here and there at points in your walk. Some of them have a footrest so that same, if it has some kind of push feature, they can choose to put their feet on the footrest or on the pedals. Some have chest straps if the child is struggling a little bit with that core stability and balance, or if they're a more excitable kid who might get up and run off it unexpectedly. Some of them have a backrest versus a kind of more bike seat without one. Again, that would be helpful for kids who need that extra support in sitting. Some of them are lower to the ground versus others. So if your child fits one bike with their feet flat on the floor, they might not necessarily fit another. And the base of support. So the wider the wheels are spread out, the more stable it's going to be. The narrower they are, the more wobbly it's going to be. Okay, so that wraps up tricycles. Oh, actually, I will just touch on a couple tips of learning how to ride a tricycle with your little one. So first of all, I would advise to work on pedaling and steering separately. So you can start with practicing one or the other. Practicing pedaling could look like you have your hands on the handlebars for them and you're helping to guide them straight while they are practicing keeping both feet on the pedals. Versus steering, you can hold onto their seat and help with the propulsion and then practice getting them to turn around corners. Starting on a little bit of a decline, so a little bit of a downhill, is helpful because you have the assistance of gravity with you and you won't need to push as forcefully through the pedals. So that's a really good way to get used to the feel of the bike and the reciprocal motion and requires a bit less strength. Then once they're getting better, you can progress to inclines as a little bit more of a challenge. There are different pedal attachments if your child is having trouble keeping their feet on the pedals. You can get pedal straps to help keep them on. I believe you can buy them on Amazon or some people just DIY with some Velcro and glue. And then really important that your child is in a pair of supportive running shoes. I would say this goes across all the equipment I'm talking about today. If they are in something like a Croc or a very loose flip-flop sandal, there's going to be movement of their foot in the shoe, and then there's also movement of the shoe in contact with the piece of equipment, and so it's a lot of movement for them to control. Best that they have something supportive on their feet so that they can really feel the pedals well through their feet. Wonderful. Okay, so moving on to our next type of intro to bike riding. This is the balance bikes. So balance bikes have 2 wheels and no pedals, as you can see in the photo up here. So kids will typically be ready to ride these around 3 years old. So similar to the tricycle. So it's often that parents will choose to get one or the other. Some have both, but it's not necessary. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later in terms of which ones to get. For a balance bike, same as the tricycle, they'll need to have enough leg strength to propel themselves. So they should be walking, climbing, stepping up, jumping. They also need a bit more balance on this one. So the big difference here is there's two wheels in a line. So the base of support is very narrow. They don't have that wide tripod base. And so it's going to be very tippy to both sides. So to know that they have enough core stability and balance, they should be able to stand on one leg for 1 or 2 seconds. You'll see your toddler doing that by maybe stepping over something kind of high, maybe lifting their foot to put their shoe on briefly, or they're able to walk along I would say wider balance beam, not super skinny, but something kind of big enough that both their feet can stay on a very narrow base. So you may encounter these at some programs you're in or at the park. So they're able to do this without losing their balance. And then height-wise, their feet need to be flat on the ground again. The benefits of the balance bike, the big one compared to the tricycle is that they develop core stability and balance. So they really get a sense for the weight shifting side to side and how to control that. And that tends to be the hardest part of learning to ride a two-wheeler bike down the road. So the balance bike does prep them really nicely for that balance and core stability piece. They can get a good sense of weight shifting and steering as they go around corners, because they'll need to shift to steer rather than just turn the handlebars like on the tricycle. And they'll start to develop balance reactions. So if they feel themselves going over, they'll learn to put that foot out and catch themselves, or even a step further, they'll start to no longer need the foot and just be able to react through their core to keep it in the middle. There's also a few variations of these. So material of the frame, similar to the Ride-On toys we were talking about earlier. There's wooden ones versus aluminum ones. There's also different tires. So you can see the one in the bottom right corner has very smooth tires. This would be good for indoors or pavement, whereas this Strider bike here has grooved tires, which would be better if you want to take it out in the grass, or on trails. The seat height, some are adjustable and some are not. So you can think of that in terms of how well it will grow with your child, and the wheels, which we mentioned. Okay. Teaching tips to learning how to ride a balance bike. So I would start by just sitting on the bike and practicing weight shifting side to side. You can get your child to, I like to put down different things on the ground and get them to touch with one foot and then touch with the other and lift the opposite one up. And then you can also start to practice balancing on it with both feet up. So you can stabilize the bike with your hands and get them to lift both feet at the same time. So they work on stabilizing through their core and can get used to that feeling where they'll have momentary moments of both feet up as they're gliding on the bike. Naturally, when a child sits on the bike, they'll often push backwards first. So you need to teach them to advance their leg and almost pull and then push forward as they come through. You can work on cueing them to take long steps, 1 foot at a time, so that it progresses from a waddle to more of a push and glide. Encourage them to lead forward into the handlebars, as this will help the momentum. And once they get the hang of propelling themselves, you can work on doing some corners or obstacles and help kind of hand over hand teach them to shift their weight as they steer around a corner. So before I move on to bigger bikes, I believe I'm just going to make sure. Yeah, that's the next slide. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the balance bike versus the tricycle, as these are your two big options for the introduction to the world of biking, and is probably pretty relevant to most of your children at this age. So the balance bike is typically a little bit harder to learn because of the balance requirements. However, once they get it, it is extremely beneficial to their core stability and to giving them the foundation to learning a two-wheel bike. Many kids who rode a balance bike often skip over training wheels and go straight to the two-wheeler bike. Alternatively, the tricycle might be better for children who don't quite have the core stability yet and need a little bit more support. It might be better for kids who you'd like them to be a bit more independent. You feel that they're a bit safer on there. You trust that they can kind of go off and you're not too worried about them falling because it is a little bit more stable. And as I mentioned, it has those features where you can introduce it early and work up to the full tricycle. So you have the push handle that can remove, or the chest straps you can start with that can remove. Also has that added benefit of a little bit more leg strengthening if that's something you feel that your child needs. So neither one is better than the other. It kind of depends what meets your family's needs. You can have both, or you can choose to have one or the other. So these are all in preparation for the big kid bikes. So I'll talk about those next. So the first big bike is basically a two-wheeler bike, but with training wheels. So it has the two big wheels, two small wheels in the back. They have pedals, they have brakes, which will be new, and they are higher from the ground compared to the balance bikes and the tricycles. So this can be started anywhere from 3 years and up. They do come in very small sizes. Again, they'll need sufficient leg strength as well as sufficient balance, even though it does have the training wheels for support. They're a little bit wobbly and the bike seat is very small. So they still will need enough core stability to hold their balance on there. And again, their feet need to be flat on the pedals and flat on the ground. As you can see from this photo, at the bottom here, the training wheels are put on so that there's a tiny little bit of space between the wheel and the ground. This is to make sure that the majority of the weight is through the big wheels as the bike is designed to take, based on what terrain you're on. So there will be a little bit of side-to-side movement in there. Because of this, some kids do tend to rely on that safety net of the pedals so that when they tip, they know the pedal will catch them and they don't develop the balance as much, which sometimes can make it harder to transition to the two-wheeler bike. On the other side, there is the experience of riding a bigger bike. They do develop some core stability. They develop lots of leg strength and the coordination involved in pedaling, getting on and off, and steering the bike. So in that sense, it does prep them nicely for a bigger bike as well. And then lastly, the two-wheeler. So big range for this. Kids will learn to ride a two-wheeler bike anywhere from 3 to 8 years old. It depends on a lot of factors. Your child's size, their gross motor skills. It also depends a lot on the child's level of confidence and how much of a risk taker they are versus how cautious they are. So that's why it's really nice to start with one of the earlier options we mentioned. You'll basically know they're ready for a big bike if they are proficient on either their balance bike or a bike with training wheels. If the bike has hand grips, then they will need sufficient grip and finger strength to work on those as well. A good way to know is if you are able to pull it with your pinky finger, then likely your child will be able to do it with their full hands. Some bikes, they're quite stiff, and so that's a nice little test you can do. Benefits of the big bike, it pretty much encapsulates everything. So a ton of core stability required. You get the leg strength from pedaling, the balance because it's so narrow, the coordination of pedaling, stopping, starting, steering, and motor planning, especially because as they get more proficient, they'll also be adapting to the environment around them as they're riding. So that kind of wraps up bikes. I can see that some questions are filtering in. So I'll talk about scooters, and then there will be lots of opportunity for discussion at the end. Okay, scooters. So again, I'm going to start more at the beginning for when they're younger. The toddler scooter. So a toddler scooter has 3 wheels, typically 2 in the front, 1 in the back, and it has a seat and handlebars. So the child can be anywhere from 18 months plus to ride this. They should have decent balance. So they should be walking, stepping over obstacles without falling, but it is okay that they're still new to balancing on their feet because this does have the seat. Their feet should be flat on the ground when they're on the seat, but they will be able to pick them up and put them on the base if there's a push handle. Benefits of the toddler scooter. So it's a nice introduction to scootering. The ones with the push handle, like you see in the photo here, can kind of double as a scooter stroller. So if you're out for a walk, they can practice moving their feet, and then they can pick them up and you can push them a little bit when they get tired. They'll start to develop core stability by sitting on that narrow seat with movement underneath of them. They'll learn to stabilize the scooter using the handlebars. And many of the toddler ones transition into a regular scooter, either by the seat removing or the seat adding on to become part of the shaft that is the handlebars. So most of them are convertible. Okay, and then they typically convert into the 3-wheel scooter, which you can also just buy as a normal 3-wheel scooter. So these have 3 wheels and a wider base. So typically the front's a bit bigger, 2 wheels, back is a bit more narrow, 1 wheel. Kids will be ready to ride this anywhere from 2 years and older. They do need a bit more balance to be able to ride this one. So they should be able to stand on 1 leg for 1 or 2 seconds or walking on that little balance beam. Then you'll know they'll have the single leg balance to be able to be on 1 foot while they push with the other. The handlebars should be at chest height. So ideally they are at chest height at the lowest level so that it can grow with your child. And the benefits of this scooter is they develop great leg strength and balance on the 1 leg. There's a lot of coordination involved because you're moving your legs separately. One is the stabilizing leg and one is the pushing leg. And then also the motor planning to practice, again, pushing, gliding, and then incorporating steering as well. I'll actually just go back. These also, I should mention, most of them have lean to steer features. So the actual handlebars don't turn the wheels. When you lean to one side, then the wheels will turn in that direction. So they actually turn by weight shifting. Then when they're a bit older, about 5 years and older, they can progress to the kick scooter or the 2-wheel scooter. So this will have 1 wheel in the front, 1 in the back, and they will typically be much more narrow through the base. So you'll know they're ready for this when they are proficient on their 3-wheel scooter. They are, getting going fast, they're gliding, they're putting 1 foot behind the other as they glide, and they're using that brake in the back, and then they're able to steer with it. You need a lot more balance for this one. The wheels move a lot and it's a very narrow base. So they should be able to stand on 1 leg for 5 to 10 seconds and walk on a narrow balance beam 1 foot in front of the other, or be able to hop on 1 foot. These are just examples. These are not a checklist. They must have these skills to buy the scooter. However, if you see your kid doing these skills, then likely they have enough balance to be successful on the scooter. So I'm just trying to give you some tangible ways to know when they're ready. Height-wise, feet should be, oh, sorry, that's from the bikes one. Same as the other scooter, handlebars at chest height. The benefits of the kick scooter, it works a lot on balance, leg strength, coordination, and motor planning. So similar to the 3-wheel one, but a lot more balance. And anything that involves balance requires use of your core, which is very helpful. Okay, learning to ride scooters. So the first thing you'll want to do is determine the child's dominant foot. So that's not always the same as their hands. So first I would just try asking them to hop on the scooter and see what feels most comfortable for them. There also is if they're really not sure and they keep going back and forth, there's the trick of you stand behind them, you give them a little push, and whichever foot they step forward to catch their balance with is typically their dominant foot. I would then practice standing on it and lifting the other foot up one at a time and just balancing on that stance leg as they lift the other one up. Then you can practice going from standing to pushing and gliding. And it will probably look like small steps at first, and then you can encourage longer steps and holding their one foot up for a couple seconds as they glide. Once they've gotten a little bit of speed, you can practice gliding in tandem. So that's one foot behind the other. So you can go push, push, glide, and put the one foot back. Once they can do that, then they can practice to start using the brakes. So that back foot starting to push back on the brake on the back wheel. And then steering, as I mentioned, most of the scooters with the two wheels in front are lean ones. This one in the photo here has two wheels in the back, less common, but they are out there. So this one would be a turn handlebars likely. So making sure they know how to use those so they can practice to turn. Wonderful. So many options that we talked about. I typically get questions, what's better, scooter versus bikes versus balance bikes? They work on different things. It's a good idea to kind of follow your child's interests and see what they're interested in, maybe take them to the store, see what they like. In general, if I had to pick one, I tend to quite like the tricycles or the balance bikes at an early age because it does require, it develops very symmetrical strengthening and balance, whereas the scooter is more of a one-legged activity. However, that can be a great way for them to develop some independence. And usually the scooters are a little bit less scary or a bit more approachable than the bike because they can so easily step off them. And if you have the opportunity, having both is great because, as I said, they do work on different things. So in terms of having options, there's a lot on the market these days that are multiple things I just mentioned combined into one. So let me show you some examples. So here on the side, for example, we have this bike that becomes a tricycle, a balance bike, and a three-wheel ride-on toy, a balance bike, and then a tricycle. So the features, the wheels can be moved around, the pedals can be taken on and off. This big stroller takes you all the way from a kid sitting in a stroller with his feet on the foot pedals to starting to put their feet on the pedals with the push handle and then to full tricycle. This one down here is kind of like a mini bike with training wheels with the push handle that eventually converts into a balance bike. And this one up here is kind of cool. It does tricycle, three-wheel balance bike, and scooter. So it actually combines the scooter and the bike aspect. This is not all. There are so many more out there. The only thing I would say is because they're so convertible, all the parts come on off, they are likely not as durable as some of the other ones and might not withstand wear so much on more bumpy terrain. However, really nice opportunity for when they're young and you want to try some different things. Okay, so after this webinar, you will be receiving a table that looks like this that summarizes everything I have talked about today and the one for scooters as well. So you'll be able to look back on this. And perfect, we have lots of time to open the floor up for questions for me.
Yeah, thank you so much, Mo. Yes, we have a lot of questions already from our attendees, so I'm gonna read them out loud to you, and you can speak to our audiences. So one of the questions that we received is, would you recommend balance bikes? What is the benefit versus starting with a tricycle?
Awesome question. So I don't know when these were put in, possible that it was before I touched on some of these things. I really do like the balance bike. I find it really prepares them for, as I said, the core stability and the balance and getting used to that unsteady seat and surface that they're sitting on. It translates really well to learning the full two-wheeler bike. I think the tricycle is a good option for kids who might have a bit more trouble with that balance and really just would benefit from a stable base and just some leg strengthening before being ready to transition over to the balance bike. So I would see the tricycle as a step before balance bike if you have a kid who just needs a little bit more time. Some kids get right on the balance bike and get it faster, and some just need to get used to the idea of being on something with handlebars and a seat, and the tricycle is so easy and approachable in that way.
Amazing. So another question is, for a bicycle with wheels, what is the correct way to adjust the height of the seat?
Great question. So you want your child to be able to be on the seat with both feet flat on the ground. So kind of your best way is trial and error until you achieve that. But a good starting point would be when they are standing beside the bike to put it just below their hip bone. So if they're standing beside the bike and you can feel the top of their hip bone here, it should be in line with the seat. That would give you a good starting point.
Thank you so much for the demonstration. I think that's really helpful for audiences. So that was amazing. Thank you. Another question that we had here is there any difference whether the child is with or without a diaper? So this parent has heard that it's better to try when the child is toilet trained. Just let us know if that's true.
That's a great question. Honestly, I don't know any professional recommendations about this. You may encounter like just the difference of comfort versus of having the diaper versus not. But I've actually never heard this brought up. That's a great question. I would say I think physically there is no indication that you can't start while they're still in diapers. I think that's totally fine, especially the early ride-on toys. Most babies would still be in diapers when using those. And if they are not complaining or having any trouble sitting on the seats in those, then you are probably fine to continue. I wonder if this was just kind of like a benchmark of if they're toilet trained, maybe they're like at the maturity level of being ready for a bike. Not really sure, but physically, I would say either is totally fine.
Cool. Thank you so much for your insight. So how do you teach children to ride the balance bike 1 foot at a time and gliding?
Yeah. So first, I would really start with getting used to shifting their weight side to side. So sitting on the bike and then lifting one leg up and being on the other, and then switching, going to the other side, going to the other side, going to the other side, and then also holding the bike steady and have them lift both feet up so they get used to holding their balance through their core, which they'll need for the gliding part. And then after you do the side to side, just work on taking big steps. So you go to one side, then you take a big step to the next one, then you take a big step to the next one. And then you can start to work on picking it up a little bit. For the balance bike, I would really recommend encouraging the long, big strides. You just want to kind of get them going with some momentum, and then the gliding typically will happen a bit more naturally.
Amazing. So this next question is interesting, and I think a lot of parents here will find it relatable. So this parent, she has a 32 2-month-old daughter who can pedal backwards with her tricycle, but she pushes a little bit forward on the balance bike. So the parent was wondering if there's any tips that you can provide to teach, so that she can teach her child to pedal forward.
Great question. And this is so normal. It feels a little bit more natural to them. It's also why some kids get a little bit thrown off by the bikes where you pedal backwards to brake, which I didn't touch on so much because those are more the ones with training wheels. But some kids just naturally, they'll pedal forward and then they'll want to take a little break and go backwards. And the ones that brake sometimes throws them off. They learn. But yeah, so what they really need is the coordination piece of pushing through one versus the other. That's why backwards is easier, because they're more coasting. They're not necessarily pushing. So one way I like to do is sometimes I'll put pieces of colorful tape or stickers on their feet if they don't know their lefts and rights so well. And then you can cue like push blue, red, and really get that symmetrical pushing. I think continuing for this parent specifically, having the balance bike and the tricycle will be so great. So if they're starting to get it on the balance bike, it's going to translate to the tricycle. And I would just hold their seat and give them a little bit of help so that they can work on the forward and then reduce your support as able. My other big tip would be put them on a decline so they don't have to push so hard.
Thank you. So our next question, this parent just wants to know which would be best to learn first for their child, so a bike or scooter?
Great question. It's hard to say. They're both really great. I think scooters are really compact, really easy to throw in the car, really easy to bring with you. I think I said before, I really like the bike as a foundation for physical development, to have an early introduction to get used to navigating a bike, to strengthen your body symmetrically. But the scooter also works on balance and coordination and is way more portable, and kids usually take to it a bit quicker. So they're both great options. Kind of depends what fits best for you and your family.
Speaking of bikes, there are bikes without handle brakes. So are the ones with handle brakes preferred?
Yeah, so as I mentioned, there's the ones with handle brakes and the ones with the backwards pedaling. They're both, there's not really a better one, as long as your child can comfortably use the handle brakes well. You just want them to be able to kick those brakes on quickly if needed. So that's the idea with the backward pedal, is it's just supposed to be way easier for kids who might not have the finger control for the brakes yet. But if you try it out with your kid and they can use them no problem, then there's no reason that they can't use those ones, as long as it's very clear that they know how the brakes work.
Great, thank you so much for the clarification. So another parent just wanted to know, how long should it take for their child to kind of understand how to ride a balance bike?
Good question. This is so child dependent. Some kids take to it right away, like within a couple times being out on it. Other kids I've had come to physio here and they bring their balance bike and we work on it because they just need a little bit more one-on-one to help break down the skill. Some kids it can take, they could work on it all summer, and maybe they're walking and they're getting a bit faster, but they're not fully gliding, and then maybe they just need another year of maturing, and then the next year it really clicks. So it could take a couple days to a couple months, but I would say if your kid is over 4 and you've worked on it for a month or two and they're really not getting it, then they might just need a little bit more one-on-one support, and that's an awesome time to come get some support from physio.
Amazing. So another parent had a question that if their child always rides a stand-up scooter with the same foot, will it affect her body in terms of development while growing up?
This is such a great question. So it is totally normal to have one dominant foot. And the reason I've been talking about, I sometimes like the bikes because they're a bit more symmetrical, is that when children are young, under the age of 3, they shouldn't really have a dominant side yet. They're not going to be right or left-handed till between 2 to 3 years old, and they're not going to develop a dominant foot or leg until they start to do a one-legged sport. So the scootering is probably going to be their first introduction to using one leg over the other, and then they might start to play things like soccer, gymnastics, anything they need to push off one leg, it will start to emerge. So it is normal to have a dominant leg a little bit older in life, but when they're younger, especially under 2, they should be using their body pretty symmetrically so that they are able to then transition to using one seamlessly later. So nope, you don't need to be worried about it for the scooter. It's supposed to be a one-sided sport, and it's totally normal.
Perfect. For balance bikes, should we be encouraging balancing or picking feet up, or let them pick their feet up when they naturally start balancing?
You should encourage it once it naturally starts happening. The big thing is they need enough momentum. They need to be going fast enough to lift both feet and glide. So if you're going slow and just going push, push, lift up, like if they're not going fast enough, they're just going to topple over. You really just want to help them get to the point where you can see they're really getting some speed and their feet are not stopping every time, but just pushing reciprocally, and then they naturally will start to usually lift them once they feel confident enough.
And is there like a starting point for children to shift from balance bikes to a two-wheeler?
Yeah, so anywhere, like the two-wheeler can start anywhere from 3 to 8 years old. So if your kid started the balance bike at just under 3 or 3, they could be ready to do a two-wheeler the next year, or they could need another several years until they're ready. It really kind of depends what your kid is like. Another kind of great way to make the transition is you can make your bike, your regular two-wheeler bike, into a balance bike. So they might be done with their toddler balance bike. Maybe they're too big for it, or maybe they just seem to be outgrowing it. You can take a two-wheeler bike and remove the wheels and lower the seat and just let them use it as a balance bike, getting used to the bigger frame. And then you can bring the seat up and put the wheels on when they're ready.
Amazing. Thank you so much. So we just have some other questions here for you. So are there any particular types of bikes, scooters, or ride-on equipment that are more suitable for children with special needs or varying abilities?
So a tricycle is a really awesome place to start. There are, as I said, you could use a regular tricycle and have strap-on supports for the feet if they're having trouble keeping their feet on them. And then there also are tricycles that get made in bigger sizes as well. So that's a really good one. And then there is the opportunity to ride a bike with a different setup. It might have like a lower seat or a seat with a backrest. It's kind of a whole other area. There are some companies that make really great adaptive equipment. This is something that's harder for me to give global advice. I would really recommend consulting a physio about this for your child's specific needs.
Amazing. Yeah, thank you so much. So this parent just had a question about on the subject of leg dominance. Is it normal for a toddler to walk up and down the stairs with one leg? And they just want to note that would be their dominant leg, and if there's any tips on helping the toddler improve their balance.
Great question. So it is typical for a toddler to go up the stairs when you say one leg, as in step together, step together, step together, verse one over the other. Yes, it is normal for kids to do the step together up to the age of 2. Between 2 to 3, they should start to do one foot over the other. What would be not necessarily typical is if they always lead with the same foot. If it's always the right one that goes up first, then that is usually a sign that the right one's a little bit stronger. And it creates a bit of a cycle, because if one side's stronger, they'll always choose to use that side because it's easier. And then that side gets even more stronger because they keep strengthening it, and the other side never gets an opportunity to catch up. So that's something I see all the time. And it's important to correct that, because you don't want to have too much of a strength discrepancy, so that when you get to skills like jumping, where you need to push with 2 legs together, you want them to be equally strong. So there's a bit of a difference between actually having a strength discrepancy and being a lot stronger on one side versus just having a dominant leg, for example, the one you scooter on, but then they're using them equally kind of on stairs, on ladders. So if you do see that in your child, I would definitely encourage them to practice the other one. Again, love to use stickers and cue which one to use, or you can even put painter's tape on your stairs and cue them to step onto certain colors with certain legs. And the other part of the question was ideas for balance. Anything that is unstable under their legs. So you could set up little obstacle courses with pillows or cushions and get them to walk across those at home. With this weather, the playground is your best friend for that kind of stuff. I once heard another physio use the term, allow your children to do dangerous things carefully. So we only get better by trying skills a little bit outside of our comfort zone. So giving your children the opportunity to challenge themselves and do things that might be a little bit too hard, that maybe you need to hold them lightly while they try it, will really help their physical development.
And just kind of,
you're always guarding for safety. But yeah.
Thanks, Mo. Just kind of tying it back to ride-on equipment and bikes. So in terms of balance and coordination skill development, you touched on like stickers and other activities. Are there any specific other gross motor activities that can help build necessary skills for these type of equipments?
Great question. Being on a swing is really great for practicing core stability because it's moving and you have to hold on and keep your balance on it. Anything where you're straddle sitting on, like even if you have a balance beam and your kid is like sitting with their legs dangling over top of it, that kind of gets them the balance that would be similar to sitting on a bike. What else can I give you? Yeah, anything at the playground that is like you're stepping between something, like little pods or little rocks, or walking on something narrow is all really great for their balance.
Are there any games or activities that you can kind of incorporate for children to kind of supplement and build those gross motor skills while using these type of equipments?
Yeah, like you mean like ways to get them engaged in doing these types of quote unquote exercises?
Yeah.
Yeah. A classic is the floor is lava, or making some kind of obstacle course where they can't touch the ground, or maybe there's water or little sharks in the water. That's always fun to get them to step between things. Another one could be any type of back and forth game that has pieces. So you could take a puzzle, take all the pieces out, put them on one side, put your puzzle on the other side, and get them to walk on a balance beam or walk on the cushions as they go back and forth. Some other really great things you can teach them to use their body that requires core strength and coordination would be bear walking. So like this, on their hands and feet, walking like a bear. Really, really awesome. Could start that around 2 years old, or closer to 3. You can start doing lifting up like this and making a table, or acting like a crab are also really good ways to strengthen their bodies in preparation for using these equipment.
Thank you so much, Mo. I really love the demonstrations, and I think our audiences here really appreciate you doing that as well. One of our parents just has another question. They're wondering if it's possible and recommended to skip over training wheels by going from balance bike straight to a 2-wheeler.
Definitely possible, and I would go that route if you feel that your child is picking up really quickly on the balance bike, and tends to generally have good balance, has more advanced gross motor skills. You see them climbing and jumping and running. Your kid best, but it's definitely possible, and definitely I would encourage you to go that route if you can. The added training wheel step is nice for kids who just need a little bit more confidence, a little bit more strengthening, and a slower, more gradual transition. But definitely, I think like a lot of the bike camps and bike groups will encourage that transition where possible, and especially using the strategy of using your big bike as a balance bike initially.
So just wanted to share this question that I think is really interesting. So the parents were wondering if you can recommend any resources such as books that provide further information or activities to support children's gross motor skills in regards to bikes, scooters, and ride-on equipments.
I don't know of any books per se. There are a couple websites that are great. Would, Fanny, if I share them with you, could you just pass them on to everyone following this? Would that work?
Yeah, definitely. So all of our attendees, everyone who registered for this webinar will be getting a recording and follow-up email after this webinar. So the last question that we have here actually is, how can parents reach out to you to learn more about their child's gross motor needs or what to do when they want to meet with pediatrics physiotherapists?
Amazing. I love this question. So couple things. First of all, I'll make sure that my personal email address gets circulated with your follow-up email, and any of you are welcome to reach out to me with questions. I'm more than happy to chat. And then additionally, if you're interested in bringing your child in for any kind of assessment for their gross motor skills, you do not need a referral and you don't need a per se concern. We do general motor milestone check-ins for both babies and toddlers, where we can just see what your child is doing and if that is lining up with what's expected for their age, and if not, figuring out why they might be having some challenges in some areas, and we can find ways to work on it. Our clinic is full of toys and play structures, and everything is very play-based. And it is also generally covered by extended health benefits if your child is covered under yours. So it's just considered regular physiotherapy for kids. So anyone is welcome to call or look online and book an assessment with me or any of my colleagues. Everyone here is really wonderful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Mo. That was all the questions that we have. And I just want to say thank you to everyone here today who also attended this Kidco talk with us. Mo, thank you so much for sharing your expertise today and the services that Kids Physio has to offer. As I mentioned, there will be a recording following today's session and other materials, as well as a survey that will be popping up after this webinar ends. So thank you again, everyone, and have a lovely day. Bye, Mo. Thanks.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye, everyone.